Hello everyone and welcome to TBR's webinar, 2 + 2 = 5, Software and Services Vendors Partner to Drive Client Outcomes Through Business Intelligence. I'm Justin Sargent and I'm hosting today's session. According to TBR research, 64% of total business intelligence adoption has happened in the past 2 years, and more than half of BI customers want additional solutions. As the hype around big data increases rapidly, businesses are left to discern how to deliver more value from an exploding amount of digitized records of personal and commercial activities. Mining actual business value depends on how smart decision makers apply big data. In addition to the enormous potential for BI software vendors to deliver tools, applications, and data warehousing solutions to address analytics demand, the rapid entry of customers into the BI market creates opportunities for consulting and systems integration vendors to provide guidance, planning, development, and optimization services that lead to additional BI purchases and extract more value out of BI investments. Before I pass this over to the analyst, there are a few key things I'd like to cover for today's webinar. First, we will be recording today's session and posting it on our YouTube site, TBRI channel. We encourage you to visit the channel and watch this presentation or any of the others we've posted. Second, we'd like to hear your opinions and thoughts on the material we're presenting. Please send any questions or comments to the Q&A function. We'll address them at the end of the webinar. Third, we'll send out the slides to everyone registered for today's webcast within 24 hours of the conclusion of the presentation. You can also find the slides, as well as our thought leadership pieces, other webinars, and commentaries on SlideShare at slideshare.net/TBR_market_insight. Now let me introduce the analyst presenting today. Jeff Wollicott is Principal Analyst in TBR's software practice and oversees the syndicated research team for the software and BI services practice. Patrick Heffernan is a Principal Analyst here in TBR's professional services practice and directs the practice's syndicated portfolio and cultivates and manages projects on topics ranging from management consulting firms, financial advisory services, to emerging technologies. Andrew Smith is an analyst in TBR's software practice and leads quarterly syndicated research of top infrastructure and systems management software vendors, including Dell, HP, IBM, and CA Technologies. Finally, Jennifer Hamill is an analyst in TBR's professional services practice and is the lead author of TBR's customer research and vendor benchmark reports on the BI services market. And with that, let me hand this over to the analyst.
So this is Patrick Heffernan. I just want to start off by saying this presentation that we're going to do today comes from research that we've done over the last couple of years in the business intelligence area, both software and services. And what you're looking at here on the left explains a little bit about how we interact with our clients and what they use this research for. I want to point out in particular about the point improved competitive positioning. I mean, that's something that clients come to us for quite often. And then the other part, the last bullet there, insights around vendor strategies, customer trends, and results. I think that shows that TBR is known for its customer-centric business lens kind of research, and it's what we do really well. On the right, you see that we're basing this particular presentation on the customer research and the customer reports. As I said, we are vendor-focused. We do take a vendor-first kind of look at a market, but we do customer research to support that, to make sure that we understand what it is that customers are actually asking for from their vendors, what is that demand, how is it driving, how is it changing. And then this particular presentation, again, is supported by the other products there, including the 2 benchmarks around vendors, one around software vendors and one around services vendors. So with that, we can jump right into what we're going to do for this presentation today. Jeff?
Hi, this is Jeff Wollicott speaking, and the top 3 themes that we're going to address here is the impacts within the BI space from a software perspective, then what are the professional services pieces that are in high demand and therefore necessary to build out as a portfolio, and then lastly we will begin calibrating the opportunity, which, as Patrick said, we take from a vendor focus and bring it up to some of the larger numbers that you see from other firms that are out there. We come at it from the bottom up is, I guess, what we're saying, rather than top down. Now, if you look at software, it's outside the broad data platform war. So other than that, how did you like to play? Because that is the big skirmish right now is getting the data set. As SAP said in a recent briefing that I was in, what they're calling an inside-out strategy, because they're hinging it on the platform. But once you have the data collected, aggregated, and set in a database, be that relational, in-memory, or object, or the need to connect in between them, you need the utilities and tools in order to extract that data and have actionable insights that can be worked with by a layperson, a business analyst, rather than a data scientist. And the power of that, I can crystallize just from a personal reference. My second job out of college, I spent 4 months for a field service firm trying to do customer segmentation analysis and build out go-to-market plans for field service maintenance agreements and the size of them, and on and on and on, with profiles by tiers. It was a very massive lift and an effort. And what I saw at the CRM briefing just recently by one of the vendors was somebody just pulling on icons, doing what took me months in real time. And that is the power of it. That is how quickly businesses can extract business value from these things. It's what's quickening the pace of the transition in our own industry. These disruptors have far-reaching implications not only in our industry but in other businesses. And really, for these businesses, what they have to do is understand what is capable with the new technologies and really take a look at the change management they may have, which goes to the professional services piece.
Right, and professional services, as we're going to hear from Andrew and Jen, professional services is a great area for us to see that sort of conjoining of the line of business and the IT needs that we've been talking about here at TBR across all of IT services. So whether it's business intelligence or management consulting or healthcare IT services or public sector IT services or digital marketing services, it's that combination of needs from both the line of business buyers and the IT buyers that we're seeing exemplified really in business intelligence. And then as Jeff mentioned, when we get to opportunity, we can't help ourselves. Even when we talk about customers and customer needs, we keep coming back to the vendors themselves. So we're going to go a little bit deeper on some of the key vendors in this space and take a look at how the customer needs and the customer demands are having an impact on the offerings that they're making and the changes that they're making around their capabilities and how they go to the market and the rest. So with that, we can finally launch into some true substance, and we'll turn it over to Andrew.
All right, thanks, guys. So, we'll start off with kind of a quick overview of what some of the customer impacts are as revealed by our data in the study. We had, among our respondents, there was an average BI budget of about $9.5 million for the second half of the year. We also leveraged some of our BI benchmark data to kind of add in a market sizing as well that helps give context. We asked respondents about their budget drivers to get kind of illustrate the current state of the market, increased M&A activity, entering new markets, as well as collaborative aspects. There's also some cost saving as well as value enhancement drivers in there as well. And then looking out over the next 5 years, customers, they indicate that there's a lot of their demand is they believe will be driven by kind of the desire to gain a competitive advantage as far as data is concerned, as that kind of valuable resource of data continues to expand exponentially within the enterprise. Customers want to make sure that they're taking the full opportunity through their BI software tools. Now, digging a little bit deeper into kind of the decision makers behind purchasing decisions on the customer side, we saw that there was definitely some interesting dynamics between LOB and business buyers. As you can see, 43% of the decision makers involved in BI software purchases, in initial BI software purchases are LOB leaders. And even within that, we saw that among LOB leaders, there's a difference between who you're looking at in terms of evaluating the vendor, kind of the pre-purchase considerations, the actual purchasing decision, and then implementation. We saw that the C-level EVPs, director-level IT executives were really the ones that are most important for vendors to target in those conversations. But then as we move on in the purchasing process and go to deployment, we see that dynamic kind of shift considerably, where it's the managers who are really responsible for not only implementing the technology and making sure and taking responsibility for the success, but also driving adoption among employees who are going to be using it. There's a similar story on the LOB side. We see lots of C-level involvement in the evaluation and the actual purchasing decision. Once again, that responsibility shifts to more of a management level once you get into the implementation aspects. So certainly findings, it's nothing groundbreaking that there's going to be different dynamics among purchasers here, but it speaks to the robustness of vendor offerings. They're catering to multiple demands across LOB and business, LOB and IT concerns. So really, there needs to be a very strong vetting process to make sure that everybody's aligned. There's coordination to kind of set these implementations up for success. Moving on, we touch a lot about adoption trends, timelines within the report. We see that from our respondents indicate that 64% of BI software deployments are 2 years old or less, certainly kind of indicating how much room there still is within the market to mature these deployments. However, what we also saw when we asked customers, how do you think your BI deployments are going to grow in the future? 56% responded that they plan to expand their BI capabilities or add more to their solutions. So really, I think in terms of length of time using BI software and adoption, what we've seen is that customers have really solved, I guess, the initial problems, the proof of concept phase, where they've kind of taken, maybe it was one cost-saving measure, one value add that they were looking for a specific point product to solve. They've moved beyond that, and now, what we expect to see in the market is they're going to start adding to those deployments, finding new ways to tap into legacy data stores, legacy applications, and add more value. So that leads us to the conclusion in the report that we think we've kind of crossed the chasm, to use some econ jargon, from an early adoption period to an early majority, where these BI software tools, the best practices are being established, the guidelines are being proven, and really these tools are going to continue to serve as the standard for generating value out of data moving forward. We do several heat maps within the report. This one also kind of gives you a peek at our taxonomy, which I have to preface will be changing in the next version of the report. We'll be breaking out data warehousing into kind of a different taxonomy. But here you can see a breakdown between basic tools and advanced BI tools. What we're talking about here is kind of the technology criteria that customers are considering when purchasing a BI solution. We do the same for vendor criteria as well and break that down by vendor, so we kind of get both sides of the story with the customer. As you can see at the top of when it comes to technology, customers want analytics capabilities. They're less concerned about price, less concerned about any previous relationship with their vendor. They're really looking for kind of the tools themselves to be able to execute what they're looking for, as well as integrate and be interoperable with their existing infrastructure. Certainly, they don't, back to my point on the previous slide, they're not looking to kind of do a wholesale shift in their infrastructure. They want to take in a product that's going to integrate and be easy to use and quick to deliver value. Down below is just diving deeper into customer satisfaction by basic tools. We saw that 50% of respondents said that the tool did not meet their expectations. Now, on the one hand, we think that's because when you're talking about basic tools, you're catering to a wider customer set. You're certainly not, vendors aren't going to be able to provision everything to everyone, so that certainly is an important factor there. But as well, what was interesting is that when we dug further into satisfaction by tools, we saw that basically this heat map was kind of flipped on its head, where the vendor relationship, simplified user interface, things like that, customers were very satisfied with. On the other hand, they were, it makes sense that their most important criteria they're most critical of, but they were most critical of the analytics capabilities. They were most critical of price. So certainly highlighting that there's lots of room here for vendors to expand on. There isn't, while the top of the market might be crowded, there isn't one vendor who excels in one certain part of the market, cornering the competition. There's lots of room we see here for vendors to disrupt, basically. Moving further into adoption and deployment, we asked respondents what they're using, what they plan to use in terms of BI software deployment, whether it was through private cloud, public cloud, hybrid deployments. What we thought was interesting is kind of the larger delta on the hybrid cloud side between what's currently in use and what's planned for future purchases. So not only does that kind of illustrate where the market's going, it shows that it's another kind of proof point that customers, they're looking to access more and more data with these solutions. They're not satisfied with either accessing just their private data or accessing data on premises. They want to be able to kind of access as many data repositories as possible and use that within their tools. So certainly a trend that we'll be following moving forward as well. Moving on to the next slide, this kind of complements the cloud adoption trends. What we're also looking at in terms of future adoption is really what customers are looking for as high-value differentiators. In the report, we go into mobility and in-memory deployments specifically and kind of track that adoption by vendors and also by what customers are satisfied by. Here, the data shows that customers, 57% of respondents, they're interested in accessing BI capabilities on a mobile device. So certainly the demand is there, but at the same time, we've been tracking now the functionality desired on a mobile device over the year, and just from the first half of the year to the second half of the year, you can see there's some significant, 5 to 7 percentage point swings in terms of customers and what they want. Certainly there isn't one kind of end-all, be-all mobile solution that's attracting customers. They're looking at things across reporting, data discovery, event processing, and the popularity of those, that accessibility has changed just over this year. So once again, highlighting the fact that with high-value, differentiated things like mobility and in-memory, certainly there's room for disruption, room for competition, room for vendors to kind of find their niche and exploit it and attract customers that way. So with that, I'll pass it over to Jen here, who's going to go more into the services side of the story.
Thanks, Andrew. And I think that last slide really highlights the opportunity for the services vendors, that unsuredness about what the business value that these different tools can provide. The proliferation of so many options is really driving a lot of opportunity for services vendors to come in and demystify a lot of the process for choosing which BI solutions to go with. So look at this slide. As we've been talking about, end users are increasingly interested in using BI to cut costs and to boost revenue, and this creates substantial opportunity for professional services vendors. And you can see here that we're expecting that budgets will increase by about 8% in the next year. And as Andrew mentioned earlier, customers are new to BI. They're expecting faster time to value for analytics investments, and they're using KPIs related to operational efficiency and total cost of ownership and other business objectives to measure the value that they're getting from BI. So we think that the demand for professional services for BI is clear, to drive those business outcomes. But what we found interesting in the budget data is that the funding for BI investments is still firmly coming from the IT budget. So even though the LOB managers are becoming more involved in the decision-making process, the money is coming from IT. So therefore, BI vendors must, continue to maintain that dual messaging that's grounded both in the achievable business results that analytics can bring and in understanding the technical realities that organizations face, including legacy enterprise systems. So really having those two sets of skills is very important for BI services vendors to succeed. So let's look at the segment breakdown. Here we're looking at the incidence rates across the 4 service lines that we cover for BI professional services. And just to highlight all the different segments that we're talking about here, we are providing definitions for our taxonomy later in the deck. We probably won't spend too much time on them in this presentation, but that will be available to you should you want to review later and come back with questions. So here, BI service usage, looking at the data, it's declined from 1/2 to 2/2 14. However, the customer evaluation of the services has increased, and this is really indicating opportunity for services vendors in 2015. This is the first round, or the first, I guess, full year of the survey that we've completed. So looking at these results, it's hard to really call this a trend, but our theory is that these results reflect seasonality in BI services purchasing, with more short-term projects coming in the first half of the year when budgets are new and fresh. But we'll keep an eye on this in the next iteration to have something more definitive to say on that. And just one other note here, just following the trend, Patrick mentioned how we've been looking at the cloud market as well, so in other areas of IT services. So we're seeing a similar trend in BI that we saw in cloud when we started the customer research program about 5 years ago, that consulting is really what leads professional services adoption, and managed services follow. So this really positions vendors with end-to-end service capabilities for the greatest success as this market matures.
And this is Patrick Heffernan. Let me just weigh in here on one point, and that's the consulting aspect of this tracks very closely with what we're seeing across all of IT services, and we expect, and we've been talking for a little bit now here at TBR about a spike in strategy consulting and consulting as a whole. And it's sort of it's a result of a lot of different technologies coming together at a very confusing time, and legacy systems still in place that need to be either bolted on or enhanced or thrown out and replaced. And you combine that with digital, with mobility that Andrew mentioned, with analytics that we're talking about here in business intelligence, and you can see that there's a need for that consulting front end, that explanation. So we do believe that there's going to be a spike this year and next in demand for consulting. It's going to benefit those that are already in the space and those that have the ability to scale up rapidly in consulting. It will probably taper off. I think when we do this webinar in 2 years from now, we're going to see a different picture in terms of what customers are expecting to be purchasing over the next couple of years. But right now, we expect that consulting demand is going to shoot up through the moon.
Okay, with that, we can go to the next slide and look at the vendor incidents. So those of you that saw our infographic that we released a couple of weeks ago will find this familiar. The way that we're looking now at the professional services opportunity for BI is really putting a puzzle together. So the first part, and this is what we're seeing a lot with the initial adoption of BI professional services, is that customers are really, they're realizing quickly that BI and analytics will be essential to compete in the new data-driven economy. So they're looking to the software vendors first to help them implement the solutions as quickly as possible. And similar to the last round of the survey, the top 4 most adopted vendors for BI services were those major data platform vendors that Jeff mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. So IBM retained its position as vendor of choice, had nearly 20% of respondents in this most recent round of the survey using IBM for BI professional services. And so just a couple of other data points here. Across all four of the service segments that we looked at in the last slide, speed was the dominating factor driving vendor selection. So that's really solidifying for us that speed is really what's driving adoption of professional services now, and the software vendor is usually the fastest way to get a BI software solution implemented. And then, as we see BI service spending increasing, the expectations for ROI are increasing as well. So here's another data point that 56% of survey respondents are expecting to achieve their ROI within 1 year. So that's really putting the pressure on for BI services vendors to deliver that quick business value. But before you can get there, you have to ensure that the analytics solution fits within the broader IT landscape. So that will bring us to the next slide, where we talk about these are some of the top IT concerns that are impacting the purchasers of BI professional services. Data security remains the top long-term concern for BI professional services buyers, and that's related to a lot of the high-profile data breaches that we hear about in the news all the time, really reinforcing the need for vendors to build their security and access management expertise to help ease those customers' fears when it comes to adopting BI. And then when we asked our survey respondents what they wanted their BI services vendor to improve, more than a third of them answered technical expertise around BI solutions. We believe this reflects the skills gap around big data and analytics, and our next round of the survey is going to dig deeper into those talent management issues, but we already see that the opportunity for professional services vendors to customize tools to suit those end-user skill levels and also to provide training services. So finally, we found that customers are most likely to buy their operations management in concert with other professional services, and this reflects that growing adoption of hybrid IT environments so that involves data stored both on-premise and in the cloud, and we expect this to continue as cloud-based analytic solutions become more commonplace.
The only thing I would add here, too, is that security, it's not surprising to see security here on this slide. In every single customer survey we do and every single conversation we have with IT services clients or with the IT vendors themselves, security comes up as one of the highest ranked priorities, both for the vendors as sort of table stakes, what they have to be able to bake into all of their engagements, and then also clients. It's not going to go away. It's in the news too much. I think even as IT security, or IT services vendors in BI and more broadly, even as they make those security services such an integral part of everything they do, just having it being in the news and having it be top of mind and having still a little bit more fear and uncertainty and doubt around security is what's going to continue to keep it at the top of this chart.
All right. So with all those underlying IT architecture concerns in place, we see that services vendors are uniquely positioned to bring all the pieces of BI, the BI puzzle, I guess, if you look at the brain here, together by using their industry expertise and their trusted advisor relationships to really understand those customers' unique business objectives and to be able to tailor the BI solutions to meet those needs. The major software vendors, they're catching on to this messaging of business outcomes when they're promoting BI solutions, but we all know that true business transformation, it takes more than just words. It takes a dedicated consulting partner to help the client take a hard look at its business challenges, determine which solution or combination of solutions will help achieve those goals, and then to manage the organizational changes that are necessary for BI to really work as designed. With the exception of IBM, which we discussed a lot in both of our professional services research and our software, the major software vendors don't want to be in the services business. They're really more focused on the more profitable software, business, and they're not seeing the professional services as an area that they're looking to invest other than, the training services. So the opportunity is there for services vendors to address those needs for guidance and expertise as this analytics market continues to grow. So here we've listed the top business challenges that our survey respondents said they expect to face in the next year. In the rest of the report, we go into much deeper detail about, both internal and external factors that are impacting purchasing around BI and analytics. But before we take your questions, we did want to take a few moments to look at a few vendors outside that core group of 4 that we see as contenders to benefit from the next wave of BI adoption. So we'll move to the next slide. Gave away then. So keeping here with services, I've listed here, these are the next 4 adopted vendors, so numbers 5 through 8, which we found are split between the more hardware-led, so HP and Cisco, and the C&SI-led vendors, so that would be Accenture and Capgemini. And again, as we mentioned throughout this entire presentation, we go into much deeper detail on the vendor-centric view in our vendor benchmarks, but the customer research indicates a couple of different approaches to capture BI services opportunities. For hardware-centric vendors, it's all about building an ecosystem that includes not just analytics, but cloud, networking, and connected device technologies. And these can be delivered through a fully managed infrastructure platform to drive long-term and sticky engagements. So we're seeing HP and Cisco both actively moving in this direction with their own IP-based platforms. And for those vendors, we see that the SMB market is particularly ripe with opportunity. These customers are not as well served by the major vendors such as IBM or some of the other top-tier service companies that really focus on the large enterprise. So this is an area of opportunity for those vendors that are more focused on the ecosystem. And then for services-led vendors, that trusted advisor relationship is really key. This is something that Accenture and Capgemini both do well. But continued investment in industry expertise and that alliance network will be necessary to stay on top of the changing customer needs and also the evolving technology landscape. So as I mentioned, Accenture and Capgemini, they're both aggressive in building and expanding strategic alliances and hiring industry experts and developers to deliver that higher value and end-to-end services capabilities. So I'll turn it back, unless anyone has anything to say on this slide, I can turn it over to Andrew to go through the software opportunity. All right.
Yeah, so like Jen mentioned, there were kind of a core market leaders that we saw among our respondents, including IBM, Microsoft, Oracle, SAP, HP were kind of the leaders in that category. But within the report itself, we dig into kind of what customer criteria was by technology and by vendor and their satisfaction across the entire vendor set. I mean, some of the highlights just as far as satisfaction goes, Microsoft had some of the lowest customer satisfaction scores with its product roadmap, according to our respondents. IBM had some of the highest satisfaction with the vendor's working knowledge of existing IT infrastructure and being able to integrate with that. SAP had some of the highest customer satisfaction scores for their working knowledge of BI-related security issues. So things like that we dig farther into in the report. But here, highlighting some of kind of the vendors farther down the list, Dell, we saw kind of excel when it came to price, true to their larger software strategy, where they're bundling new analytics offerings like Statistica into not only their wider ecosystem, leveraging their hardware assets as well, but also trying to bundle them along with security and networking into appliance form factors wherever possible. I think that's going to be a continued opportunity for Dell moving forward. Google, true to kind of their brand image, they have the propensity to ally and buy, almost anything they need in the space, and that's something that we think is going to be continued to happen. Customers were very impressed by Google's analytics capabilities. So as far as the functionality goes, that's there. It's just how Google is going to be able to stitch together and monetize those assets moving forward. Tableau, we saw, kind of getting to the more pure play end of the market, excelling on things like data visualization, using that strategy to kind of disrupt the market, especially some of the larger vendors who might place more emphasis on the warehousing and platform side of the equation, not so much the data visualization and analytics portion. As well as, you know, Informatica, we see kind of cropping up a lot when it comes to kind of the warehousing, the integration, really capitalizing on the data management skill set they have to not only increase their visibility and their branding, but really provide customers with scalability, integration points that we believe will continue to help them gain traction and expand their customer base moving forward. So, Jeff, I'll pass it over to you. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, the observation point I would make as you look at these four vendors is the two on the outside, Dell and Informatica, have been around for a fair amount of time. One can argue they're traditional legacy vendors having to experience and adjust to the disruption that's taking place. And interestingly, both of those firms are now private. Informatica going private just yesterday because the transformations, the impact on the business model, the shifts, the need to move from license to subscription and the drains on working capital as you do it, typically will make folks on Wall Street looking at quarterly performance relatively impatient. So they've had to go private as they try to get through this, where Google, everybody knows Google, and they have an entirely different business model, giving away the software for free, making it up on the ads. Their analytics engine, their ability for analytics marketing ad placements, they have a whole new way of going about doing business. And Tableau, on the other hand, is, as we need that simple consumable analytics, I think is a term I've heard, they're a leader in that visualization space to enable a business analyst such as myself to be able to get these things done without the need of the PhD that can get under the hood and do the actual programming. So, you know, within those four, we've got two that have to transform in order to get it done, and we've got two that have been able to kind of spring up with net new business models.
Okay, so yeah, as I mentioned before, we have some definition slides here, but we can kind of unless you want to go on into the...
Well, this is Jeff. If I just would quickly state, we had said at one point we're reconfiguring the taxonomy definitions, and we did have one question about what's the definition of a basic tool versus an advanced tool. And what we believe in a lot of cases, depending on which cohort, which individual that you're talking to, they may deem something basic versus advanced. So we are going to collapse that category into just tools, because we believe over time you'll see things rise and fall as being net new and then getting baked in or bundled in. We're also doing that because of a historical analogy I have in my head with regard to the way we had independent word processing, spreadsheet packages and presentation graphics packages that all got consolidated up as we got into these bundled suites. And we anticipate more and more of these pieces getting baked into core offerings. So that's why we're going to collapse it into tools. Data warehousing is another one where we're taking a look. The definition of data warehousing becomes fuzzy with respect to databases and what are the key differences, particularly as you start taking a look at in-memory functionality that will gain traction in the market as those things go forward. So that segment is going to be more broadly defined by us, so we can take a better look at calibrating the shift of the decline in the traditional legacy databases as unstructured databases and in-memory databases start to accelerate on the landscape. So that's a fuzzy way of talking to you about what the definitions were today and what the definitions are going to be going forward.
So here, we just wanted to give an overview of the portfolio, that all the different reports that we're now writing on BI. The two reports that we covered today are the two customer research reports. We also do semi-annual topical reports, you know, on the off quarters. So the next one of those is coming out in June on digital marketing analytics.
And then we've got questions. All right.
Excellent. All right, so if you have any questions, please send them to the Q&A function.
Well, there's a couple up there. There's a couple in there.
All right, so first question. How much of these engagements come from software vendors against third-party SIs?
This is Jeff. I'll take an initial pass at that with some insights I believe I've received from some analyst conferences from the software vendor perspective. And they believe they need to be involved, the software vendors need to be involved because of the fundamental shifts in the data fabric that is going on with the way in which they're working with in-memory databases and as well as the data integration between the different cloud layers. And the terminology that kept coming back over and over again is that in the new world order, you need to configure rather than customize the software. And the way a software vendor said it to me, they know the large professional service engagements that are going to head south are those where the SI takes an on-prem mentality to the engagement, meaning that they're customizing all this work. And from the software perspective, these vendors want to get into a continuous update stream cycle. So they've got one version of the truth out in the public domain. So in that regard, the more that people customize, the less they're going to gain the advantage of the technology, which is why it ties into a strategy-led engagement at the front end to understand what is happening. With that, I'll stop.
That's good answers.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Why does vendor relationship have such a small role?
This gets back to slide number probably 6 or 8.
Yeah.
Why don't we take a look at that slide, and Andrew could probably answer that.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, this is kind of looking at customer choice from a technology criteria perspective. So as we would expect, the vendor relationship plays a smaller role. And we dig farther into this in the report, analyzing vendor relationship more from the vendor perspective. And we see that there are certainly some vendors who lead in that category, who, particularly vendors like IBM who have a larger ecosystem, I think plays an impactful role on customer choice. And like I said, the satisfaction, when looking at these same criteria by satisfaction, you see that satisfaction in vendor relationship is up. So customers certainly, it's not that the vendor relationship doesn't play any role. They're satisfied with it. But when it comes to the actual tools, our data suggests that vendors are not going to be able to lead or close the sale with the conversation that you have an existing relationship with us. That's why you should buy this tool. Customers are much more interested in the capabilities and the interoperability when it comes to that conversation.
Yeah, and it's a funny question because when we look at this and we see this data and from the services perspective, it's striking that vendor relationship is such a small criteria, but as Andrew explained, it's really a function of how we went about asking the questions and where the market stands right now and the maturity within the software space.
Right. This is Jeff. Just to feather in a little bit more, is clearly when it comes to the core the core components, i.e. the database or the core analytics engine, that vendor familiarity is good. But given that this is such a transformational shift as to what you're going to do, there's a book, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. These vendors are in a thinking slow period, meaning the power of the incumbency is relatively at its weakest. If you're going to go through that massive rip and replace, you might as well evaluate all the alternatives that are out there. That isn't as strong when it's asked in that context. Within this context of tools, it's an add-on or an attach to what is at the core. So it's an add-on. The best example there is S/4HANA, where they have Lumira, but they also partner with Burst. So Lumira is their homegrown version, but if you want Burst, that's fine, because the core revenue capture is on that fundamental underlying data infrastructure, not necessarily in the tool that allows you to visualize it.
All right, the next question. Do you think the BI approach for small business would be mostly software, since it's difficult to scale with a service? Who does that best today?
Yeah, I think that that's an accurate statement, and the first vendor to pop into my mind would be Dell. We heard from them earlier this year that they're kind of specifically taking a strategic approach on the BI side with things like Boomi and Statistica and that integration, and parts of Toad as well. They're specifically doing things, deploying solutions that have intuitive UIs that are easy to stand up and run without services and can just be, kind of deployed instantly for quick returns. So I think that that's going to be a strategy that we'll probably see more vendors, especially without the services capabilities, try to undertake. And I think as far as kind of the sales strategy goes, Dell is doing both an industry vertical specific approach and a geographic specific approach to try and make sure that they understand what customers need and can provide the right bundle of applications to kind of minimize the amount of services that need to be added on top.
Yeah, this is Jeff. I would also add into that equation IBM's Analytics as a Service, which there again is something that is a pay for by the SIP. It has some standard shells and frameworks around there. The term, I believe, is land and expand. They'll start small in different verticals or back office functions and slowly broaden that base. And again, that requires the tools and the visualization technologies in order to simplify it for folks to take care of.
So there was a question came in, what verticals are adopting business intelligence the fastest? That's a great question. We actually break down within the reports and the benchmarks, we break down verticals into 7 different industries and then an others bucket, so you could call it 8, I guess. What I'd like to do is suggest that we answer that question offline. I want to know more where that question is coming from, if it's because you're looking at a particular vertical and interested in the rate of adoption there, or whether you're looking for a broader answer across every vertical and where it's coming from. So I just asked the person who sent that in to just contact us directly, and we'll take that question offline. We have maybe one more.
Okay, yeah, I got one more question here. When do you expect in-memory adoption to accelerate?
That's an interesting question. It's on the one hand for those who have gone through the process, and it was a piece that it was kind of the man bites dog headline. Those who have gone through the process and are now in implementation and live, it exceeded their expectations. And it's the reason why I say that's a discordant tone. Over the years I've been in this industry, it's very rare for a major implementation, when it's finally done, to have everybody that worked on it say, this came out better than we expected. And that points to the value of the services-led, consulting-led engagements to determine what it is you have to do with it. So it's a fairly heavy lift. So both of the big in-memory platform players, both Oracle and SAP, have very common or similar strategies on how they're trying to hook in those capabilities without requiring their existing legacy investment, existing accounts, to have to completely rip and replace it. So it's going to be gradual because of the nature of the lift that will go on more from a business process and operations side than necessarily from the technology transformation that will happen when you just migrate it over. Do you have anything you can add to that?
All right, well, I think that's all we have time for today. Thank you, Jeff, Patrick, Andrew, and Jen, and thank you, everyone, for your questions. You can follow the Analyst and TBR on Twitter at the handles listed here, and please check our pages on SlideShare and YouTube as well. Additionally, before you sign off, we'd like to ask you to take a brief survey about today's webinar. As we research the performance of technology companies, we're also studying how we're helping our clients, and we appreciate your feedback. We'll leave the chat function open for another few minutes to give you all a chance to ask any last-minute questions. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Thank you.